Hello, my name is Valerie Lashley, and I am an abuse recovery coach, and I am speaking from the heart. Today we'll pick up from where we left off on yesterday. We had moved away from my sister, and now we were in another apartment. We didn't have a phone, so I had no way to talk to family or friends, even though I didn't really have any friends except for people that I worked with. My husband had gotten a job, a good job, before we moved into the apartment. And after we moved, I got a part-time job at the grocery store that was nearby. One Sunday, I was washing our clothes at the laundromat across the street, and this woman started a conversation with me. She was telling me about this job she had and how this man on her job was so nice to her, and most of the time he did her work and his work too. And I finally asked her where she worked, and she told me, and it was the same place my husband worked. So I asked her, what's this guy's name? And she told me, and it was my husband. So my response was, so you're the one. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I'm his wife. She said, but he told me that you all were separated and he was living with his mother. I said, well, meet moms, because we're not separated. We've never been separated. So I moved away from her at that point. I finished my laundry and I went home. And I told him that I had met his girlfriend at the laundromat. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, sure you do. You know Brenda, the one you work with. I don't know anybody by that name, was his response. I said, okay. So I went into the bedroom, shut the door, and didn't say too much of anything else. The next day, I went to work. I come home, and as I cross into the parking lot, his van is there, and she's sitting in the passenger seat. She saw me come around the corner. She jumped out, jumped into her car, and drove off. I said, oh, I see you met your girlfriend. He didn't have much of a response, and I didn't want to argue with him about it, because to be honest, by that time I really didn't care. Well, a couple of days later, she shows up on my job. I had never seen her in that store before. So she gets in my line, and I check her out, and I said, Brenda, I don't know why you're in the store. You've never been here before. I said, but my advice to you is to stay away from me. I said, now, if my husband wanted to be with you, he would have left me by now. I said, he has no intention of leaving me for you. So you can be the fool if you want to. It's okay with me. I'd gladly give him to you if he would go, but he won't. After that, she didn't bother me anymore. Actually, I never saw her come in the store again. Well, maybe a week or so, maybe even a month later, there were some young men that moved into the apartment complex. And they used to speak to me when they would see me. And finally one day one of them asked me, are you married? And I said, yeah. He said, but I've never seen your husband. I said, but I am married. He said, are you just saying that so nobody will hit on you? I said, no, I am married. He said, okay. A few days later, he knocked on my door and he said, I saw your husband's van. He said, so I know where he's been staying. He said, do you want me to take you there? And I said, no, I know where he is. There's no point. So I started to pray. I started to pray that God would take me in my sleep. I got very depressed. I was tired of fighting. He'd come home from her and pick a fight with me, and I was just sick and tired of it. I was just so depressed. Well, I got in the car one night to take my sons to get something to eat. We had to go over a railroad track. The car stalled, and I could hear God just as clear. I'll take you, but your children have to go too. And I said, no, Lord, not my children. I turned the key, the car started, and we just made it off the track. I cried and I cried. I said, well, God's not going to take me. So what am I going to do? A few days later, one of the guys came by. He had bought a red sports car. My husband worked second shift. I had become so depressed that usually when he went to work, I would drink until I passed out. But this particular evening, the guy came by and he was with the girl who lived upstairs, and he wanted to take us for a ride in his new sports car. Well, I thought, what's the harm? He's at work. I'll be back before he gets home. So what harm could it be? So I went next door and I asked my neighbor to keep an eye on my children. And she said, okay. I said I wouldn't be long. And we left. Well, we went out to the girl's mother's house just because it was a nice little ride. And she decided to stay out there instead of coming back home. And so I came home in the car with the guy. As we pulled into the lot, I could see that my husband's van was there. He had come home on his lunch break. I got out of the car, and as I got out of the car, he came outside. When I got close to him, he slapped me so hard I could see stars. I had never been hit that hard in my life, and I never have since. He practically drugged me into the house. We argued and argued and argued. Mostly he argued. I would usually just listen. The woman next door kept hearing it, so she called the police. The police came and asked me if I had somewhere to go. Not did he have somewhere to go, but did I have somewhere to go? And I said, no, I don't. So they told him, we don't want to have to come back. So can you just quiet it down? And they left. He continued, ranting and raving. She called the police again, and they came. And they told him, if we have to come back, somebody's going to jail. And asked me, are you sure that you don't have any place that we can take you? And I said no. He ranted and raved all night until it was time for him to go to work. That day, I had my sister come and get me and take me to the hospital. I checked myself in on the mental illness floor under a suicide watch. The doctor who was assigned to my case was very kind. And we talked about what I was going through. He put me on medication and told me that I needed to stay there at least 30 days. 3 days later, there was a call from my husband's job that he had been in an accident and his finger had been cut off. And I needed to come home and take care of my children. And so I checked myself out against the doctor's orders, and I went home to take care of my children. But I also had to take care of him because his bandages had to be changed 3 or 4 times a day. His finger had to be bathed in a solution. But it didn't change anything about him. He was still mean and nasty. And he kept accusing me of being with that guy in the red car. And one night I was just so fed up I couldn't take it anymore. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just walked out the door. It was cold outside. I had no coat. I had on bedroom shoes, but I didn't care. I was just tired. And I started walking towards my sister's house. And of course, he got in the van and came after me. He got out of the van and threw me into the van, cursing me all the way home. I was a bitch. I was a slut. I was a whore. I was everything but my name. Don't you know something could happen to you out here in the middle of the night? I said, it couldn't be any worse than what's happening to me at home. Pow, he slapped me. We got home. I got out of the van, and he got out. And I said to him, you know, your finger got cut off because God is sick of you using your hand against me. He turned around, he grabbed me by the neck, and he beat my head into the side of the van and said, where is your God now? Stay tuned for the next segment. This is Valerie Lashley, and I am speaking from the heart. Thank you for allowing me to come into your home, and do have a good evening.